Scott and Laci Peterson, the picture-perfect couple. They met in a California bar, a chance encounter that blossomed into a whirlwind romance. Scott, a handsome fertilizer salesman, seemed equally captivated by Laci's infectious energy. Their love story unfolded like a classic fairy tale. They settled down in Modesto, California, a quiet town where they planned to build their life together. Laci's warm smile and infectious laughter lit up every room she entered. Their love story, however, held a dark secret, a hidden truth lurking beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic life. Modesto, California, a town bathed in sunshine, where life moved at a slower pace. Their days were filled with barbecues with friends, lazy afternoons by the pool, and romantic evenings spent at their favorite local restaurants. She was thrilled to be pregnant with their first child, a boy they planned to name Connor. Her excitement was contagious, and she couldn't wait to share the joys of motherhood with Scott. But beneath the surface, a darkness was brewing, a storm that threatened to shatter their carefully constructed world. The nursery was ready, the crib meticulously assembled, every detail carefully considered. Scott, however, seemed distant, his usual cheerfulness replaced by a brooding silence. Scott, it turned out, had been harboring a dark secret, a clandestine affair with a woman named Amber Frey. Laci, heartbroken and betrayed, confronted Scott about the affair. The once unbreakable bond they shared was now irreparably broken. But on Christmas Eve 2002 in Modesto, California, a chill wind blew, carrying with it a sense of dread. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through the community, leaving friends and family grappling with fear and disbelief.
As days turned into sleepless nights, the search for Laci intensified, fueled by a desperate hope that she would be found safe and sound.
The disappearance of Laci Peterson was not a random act, but a calculated crime that would send shockwaves through the nation and expose the dark underbelly of a seemingly idyllic American town.
Christmas Eve dawned bright and clear in Modesto. Laci Peterson, heavily pregnant and radiant, looked forward to a day filled with family and the anticipation of her baby's arrival.
She had so much to be happy about, so much to look forward to. Later, a neighbor spotted Laci walking her beloved golden retriever, Mackenzie, in the nearby park. It was a seemingly ordinary moment, a snapshot of a life brimming with promise. I last saw Laci at our home, getting ready to bake cookies for a family gathering.
A detail that would later come under intense scrutiny. The discovery sent a chill down her spine. Laci's golden retriever, Mackenzie, was found wandering alone, his leash still attached, near the very park where Laci had last been seen.
Frantic calls were made. Friends and family were alerted. Hope, though dwindling with each passing hour, still flickered in their hearts.
As darkness descended, casting long shadows across the park, a sense of despair began to set in. Laci's disappearance remained a mystery, a puzzle with seemingly no answers. Scott Peterson, contacted by police while on his fishing trip, returned to Modesto.
His detached demeanor, his seeming lack of urgency, raised eyebrows and fueled whispers.
Detectives, sensing something amiss in Scott's account of the day's events, began to focus their investigation on him.
The calls, traced to a number belonging to Amber Frey, a massage therapist living in Fresno, sent shockwaves through the investigation.
Amber, unaware of Scott's marital status, revealed a secret affair, a clandestine relationship that shattered the image of the happily married man.
The revelation of Scott's infidelity, his strange behavior, and the inconsistencies in his story painted him as a man with something to hide. The nation watched, captivated and horrified, as details of Scott's behavior in the days and weeks following Laci's disappearance unfolded.
He appeared detached, almost evasive, his responses to questions lacking the raw emotion one might expect from a man who had lost his pregnant wife.
Instead of clinging to hope, of desperately searching for his missing wife, Scott seemed to distance himself from the investigation.
His demeanor, cool and collected, was analyzed and dissected by experts and armchair detectives alike.
Further fueling suspicions was Scott's decision to sell Laci's car shortly after her disappearance.
The seemingly perfect life he had presented to the world began to crumble, revealing a web of deceit, infidelity, and a chilling disregard for the life of his wife and unborn child.
The disappearance of Laci Peterson, a pregnant young woman with a bright smile and a loving family, resonated deeply with the American public.
News channels provided round-the-clock coverage, dissecting every detail of the case, analyzing every shred of evidence, and speculating on Scott Peterson's guilt or innocence.
Images of Laci, her radiant smile frozen in time, and Scott, his demeanor scrutinized for any flicker of guilt or remorse, became ubiquitous.
The media frenzy surrounding the case had a profound impact on the investigation and the lives of those involved. The nation was captivated, their collective gaze fixed on Modesto, California, as the search for Laci Peterson and the pursuit of justice continued.
Every inch of the park where she was last seen was meticulously combed, every lead, no matter how small, painstakingly pursued.
The disappearance of Laci Peterson triggered a massive search effort, one of the largest in California history.
Weeks turned into months, and still there was no sign of Laci.
Detectives, working tirelessly, were piecing together a puzzle, their focus narrowing on the one person who seemed to hold the key to Laci's disappearance, her husband, Scott.
The community, their hearts heavy with worry, refused to give up hope.
They distributed flyers, organized candlelight vigils, and prayed for Laci's safe return. Scott Peterson's alibi was he went on a solo fishing trip to the Berkeley Marina on Christmas Eve. We interviewed fellow fishermen, hoping to find someone who had seen Scott at the marina that day. We analyzed tidal charts and weather patterns, comparing them to Scott's account of his fishing trip. The more they investigated, the more Scott's story unraveled. It was becoming increasingly clear that Scott Peterson had something to hide, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth, no matter how disturbing it might be.
April 2003. The case of the missing Laci Peterson took a dramatic turn, sending shockwaves across the nation and shattering the fragile hope that had clung to the hearts of those who prayed for her safe return. The grim discovery made by a couple strolling along the shoreline of San Francisco Bay confirmed their worst fears.
A tiny, decomposing body, its gender still undetermined, washed ashore, its lifeless form a tragic testament to a life cruelly cut short. The following day, just a short distance away, another gruesome discovery. The remains of a pregnant woman, her body ravaged by time and the unforgiving currents of the bay.
The news spread like wildfire, igniting a firestorm of grief, anger, and disbelief. The nation, captivated by the case for months, watched in horror as the tragic reality of Laci Peterson's fate unfolded. The search, once fueled by hope, was now a somber mission to recover the remains of a young woman and her unborn child. The bodies, though badly decomposed, were positively identified as Laci and Connor Peterson. The news, delivered with heavy hearts, confirmed what many had already suspected. Laci and her unborn child were gone, victims of a horrific crime that defied comprehension. The discovery of Laci and Connor's bodies sent shockwaves through Modesto and beyond.
The once quiet town, now forever linked to the tragic case, became a hotbed of media attention. The streets teeming with reporters, camera crews, and curious onlookers.
Whispers of Scott's guilt, once confined to hushed conversations, now filled the air. The evidence, though circumstantial, painted a damning picture. His infidelity, his cold demeanor, his inconsistent alibi, and his suspicious behavior all pointed to a man capable of unimaginable cruelty.
Public opinion, once divided, now overwhelmingly condemned Scott Peterson. He became the villain in a real-life tragedy, his face plastered on newspapers and television screens across the country, his name synonymous with betrayal and murder. The pressure on law enforcement intensified. The public, outraged and heartbroken, demanded justice for Laci and Connor. The investigation, now a murder inquiry, shifted into high gear, the focus solely on building a case against the man who had once promised to love and cherish Laci Peterson. The wheels of justice began to turn. Scott Peterson, no longer a grieving husband but the prime suspect in a double homicide, was arrested. The charges were chilling. 2 counts of murder, 1 with special circumstances, making him eligible for the death penalty.
The case, already a media sensation, took on a life of its own. Legal experts dissected every detail on cable news channels, while the public debated Scott's guilt or innocence in coffee shops and online forums.
The trial, moved from Modesto to Redwood City due to the intense media coverage, promised to be a spectacle.
The prosecution, armed with a mountain of circumstantial evidence, aimed to prove that Scott, driven by a desire for a life free from responsibility and marital ties, had murdered his pregnant wife and unborn child.
The defense, facing an uphill battle, planned to poke holes in the prosecution's case, highlighting the lack of direct evidence linking Scott to the murders.
The stage was set for a legal battle that would captivate the nation, a trial that would delve into the darkest corners of the human heart and expose the fragility of love and the devastating consequences of deceit. The courtroom, packed to capacity, buzzed with anticipation. Every eye was on the defendant, Scott Peterson, his face a mask of impassiveness as he sat beside his attorneys.
The prosecution, led by the formidable Rick DiStasso, laid out their case, methodically constructing a narrative of premeditation, deceit, and cold-blooded murder.
They painted Scott as a man trapped, desperate to escape the confines of his marriage and the impending responsibilities of fatherhood. His affair with Amber Frey, they argued, was not a mere indiscretion, but a motive, a desperate attempt to reclaim a life of freedom.
DiStasso presented a timeline, carefully piecing together Scott's movements in the days leading up to Laci's disappearance. He highlighted suspicious Google searches, cell phone records placing Scott near the location where Laci's body was eventually found, and purchases of incriminating items, all pointing to a calculated plan.
The prosecution's case rested heavily on circumstantial evidence, a tapestry of seemingly unrelated events woven together to create a damning narrative.
They argued that while there was no smoking gun, the sheer volume of incriminating details, when viewed collectively, painted a clear picture of Scott's guilt.
The prosecution meticulously presented their evidence, each piece adding another thread to the web they were weaving around Scott Peterson.
They presented evidence of Scott's affair with Amber Frey, highlighting his lies and deceit, painting him as a man capable of betraying those closest to him.
They presented financial records, demonstrating that Scott was facing mounting debts, suggesting a possible motive for wanting to escape the financial burdens of his family life.
They introduced witnesses who testified to Scott's unusual lack of concern in the days following Laci's disappearance, his demeanor chillingly detached and emotionless.
The prosecution also focused on Scott's shifting alibis and inconsistent statements regarding his whereabouts on Christmas Eve, the day Laci vanished.
They argued that his inability to provide a credible account of his activities further pointed to his guilt.
Each piece of evidence, though circumstantial, contributed to the prosecution's narrative, slowly but surely building a case against Scott Peterson, the seemingly perfect husband now portrayed as a cunning and callous murderer.
The defense team, led by the seasoned Mark Garagos, faced a formidable task to dismantle the prosecution's case and sow seeds of doubt in the minds of the jurors.
Garagos, known for his sharp wit and aggressive courtroom style, attacked the prosecution's reliance on circumstantial evidence, arguing that it was insufficient to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
He argued that the prosecution's timeline was flawed, their interpretation of events biased and incomplete.
He suggested alternative explanations for Scott's seemingly suspicious behavior, attributing his detached demeanor to shock and his inconsistent statements to the pressures of the investigation.
The defense also floated the possibility of third-party involvement, suggesting that Laci might have been the victim of a random act of violence, abducted while walking her dog in the park.
They pointed to the lack of direct evidence linking Scott to the crime scene, emphasizing that no DNA evidence placed him at the location where the bodies were found.
Garagos, with his characteristic charisma and legal acumen, passionately argued for his client's innocence, urging the jury to see beyond the prosecution's narrative and consider the possibility that Scott Peterson, despite his flaws, was not a cold-blooded killer. The trial took a dramatic turn when the prosecution presented a crucial piece of evidence, a homemade cement anchor, similar to one Scott admitted to making, which they believed was used to weigh down Laci's body. The anchor, never recovered, was a key component of the prosecution's theory, and its absence had been a point of contention throughout the trial. Witnesses testified that Scott had inquired about the weight-bearing capacity of concrete anchors and had access to the materials needed to construct one. The prosecution argued that Scott had used his knowledge of fertilizer to create a custom-made anchor designed to decompose quickly in salt water, further concealing his crime.
The defense countered by arguing that the anchor was irrelevant, as there was no concrete evidence linking it to Laci's disappearance. They pointed out that no traces of cement were found on Laci or Connor's remains, and that the prosecution's theory was based on speculation and conjecture.
The cement anchor, though never found, loomed large over the trial, a tangible symbol of the prosecution's theory and a constant reminder of the brutality of the crime. It became a focal point of the media coverage, fueling public speculation and adding another layer of intrigue to the already captivating case.
The trial was punctuated by powerful witness testimonies, each offering a glimpse into the lives of Scott and Laci Peterson and the events leading up to Laci's disappearance.
Amber Frey, Scott's mistress, delivered emotional testimony, detailing their relationship and revealing Scott's lies about his marital status and the timeline of his wife's disappearance.
Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, delivered heart-wrenching testimony, sharing her memories of her daughter and the pain of her loss.
Her grief was palpable, her words a stark reminder of the human cost of the tragedy that had unfolded.
Friends and family members testified to Laci's excitement about becoming a mother, her love for her unborn child evident in every detail of the nursery she had meticulously prepared.
Their testimonies painted a picture of a young woman robbed of her future, her dreams shattered by a senseless act of violence.
The trial, though focused on legal arguments and forensic evidence, was ultimately a human drama, a story of love, betrayal, and loss.
The witness testimonies, raw and emotional, brought the human cost of the crime into sharp focus, reminding the jury and the nation of the lives forever altered by the tragedy. As the trial reached its climax, the nation hung on every word, every piece of evidence, every gesture of the defendant.
The courtroom drama, broadcast live on television, became a shared national experience, a real-life whodunit that sparked endless debates and water-cooler discussions.
Millions tuned in daily, captivated by the legal maneuvering, the forensic analysis, and the emotional testimonies.
The case had it all: a beautiful pregnant victim, a seemingly perfect marriage shattered by infidelity, and a husband who became the prime suspect.
News channels offered wall-to-wall coverage, analyzing every detail, dissecting every witness statement, and inviting legal experts to dissect the prosecution's case and the defense's strategy.
The public, bombarded with information, formed their own opinions, debating Scott Peterson's guilt or innocence with a fervor usually reserved for sporting events or political elections.
The trial became a cultural phenomenon, a shared national narrative that transcended the courtroom walls and seeped into the fabric of everyday life.
It was a constant presence in homes, workplaces, and social gatherings, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the dark potential that lurked beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives.
The prosecution, in their closing arguments, presented a compelling narrative, weaving together the strands of circumstantial evidence into a damning tapestry of guilt. They argued that Scott Peterson, driven by selfishness and a desire for a life free from responsibility, had meticulously planned and executed the murder of his wife and unborn child. They reminded the jury of Scott's infidelity, his cold and calculated demeanor, his inconsistent alibis, and his suspicious behavior in the days following Lacier's disappearance.
They pointed to the incriminating Google searches, the cell phone records placing him near the location where Laci's body was found, and his knowledge of tides and currents, suggesting a premeditated plan to dispose of her body in the San Francisco Bay. The prosecution argued that while no single piece of evidence definitively proved Scott's guilt, the totality of the circumstances, the overwhelming weight of the evidence pointed to only one logical conclusion. Scott Peterson was a cold-blooded killer who had betrayed his vows, his family, and his humanity.
The defense, in their closing arguments, urged the jury to resist the allure of a simple narrative, to avoid being swayed by emotion or public opinion. They argued that the prosecution had failed to present any direct evidence linking Scott to the crime, relying instead on speculation, conjecture, and a character assassination of their client.
After weeks of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate Scott Peterson's fate. The nation held its breath, the tension palpable as the world waited for the verdict. Days turned into an agonizing wait, the anticipation building with every passing hour. Finally, after 7 days of deliberation, the jury reached a decision.
The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Laci Peterson, and guilty of second-degree murder for the death of Connor. The verdict, met with gasps and tears from the gallery, marked the culmination of a trial that had gripped the nation, a trial that exposed the dark underbelly of a seemingly perfect life and the devastating consequences of deceit and betrayal.
The penalty phase of the trial commenced, the prosecution seeking the death penalty. The jury, tasked with the weighty responsibility of determining Scott Peterson's fate, again deliberated. After days of agonizing deliberation, they returned with their recommendation: death.
On March 16, 2005, Judge Alfred DeLucchi upheld the jury's recommendation, sentencing Scott Peterson to death. He was to be executed by lethal injection and transported to San Quentin State Prison to await his fate. The sentence, met with mixed reactions from a public still grappling with the brutality of the crime, marked the closing chapter of a case that had captivated and horrified the nation.
For me, the guilty verdict brought a measure of justice, but little solace. The pain of losing my daughter and unborn grandson, a pain etched on my face throughout the trial, remains a constant ache.
Sharon Roach's victim impact statement, delivered with heartbreaking eloquence, gave voice to her profound grief and anger.
Laci had an infectious laugh, a kind heart, and unwavering love for her family. She found so much joy in preparing for motherhood. The nursery meticulously decorated, the tiny clothes carefully folded, all waiting for a child who would never have the chance to wear them.
Sharon spoke of the agonizing months of uncertainty, the hope that Laci would be found alive slowly giving way to despair as the grim reality of her fate became undeniable.
The pain of identifying my daughter's remains, the horror of knowing that Laci and Connor had been so cruelly robbed of their futures, is something I can never forget.
Sharon's words resonated deeply with those present in the courtroom and the millions watching on television. Her grief, raw and unflinching, transcended the legal proceedings, reminding everyone of the human cost of the tragedy, the irreplaceable loss of a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a mother-to-be, and a...
Scott Peterson, once a successful fertilizer salesman with a seemingly idyllic life, now faced a bleak future on San Quentin's death row. His days, once filled with family gatherings, golf outings, and romantic dinners, were now confined to a small, isolated cell, his interactions limited to guards and fellow inmates.
My appeals, a standard part of the legal process in death penalty cases, are winding their way through the courts, offering a glimmer of hope that my sentence might be overturned or commuted to life in prison.
His family, though grappling with the enormity of his crimes, remained steadfast in their support, clinging to the belief that he was innocent. The public, however, remained largely convinced of his guilt. The case continued to fascinate, spawning books, documentaries, and countless news specials.
Scott Peterson, forever linked to the murder of his wife and unborn child, became a symbol of deceit, betrayal, and the dark side of the American dream.
The Scott Peterson case, a modern-day tragedy, served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life, the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition, and the enduring power of love and loss. It was a case that captured the nation's attention, divided public opinion, and left an indelible mark on the American psyche.
The years following Scott Peterson's conviction were marked by a series of appeals and legal battles, each one a desperate attempt to overturn his conviction, or at the very least, commute his death sentence.
We tirelessly pursued every legal avenue, challenging the verdict on multiple grounds, alleging juror misconduct, prosecutorial errors, and the prejudicial impact of the intense media coverage.
They argued that the trial, moved from Modesto to Redwood City due to the overwhelming media attention, was inherently unfair, tainted by the relentless scrutiny and public pressure.
There was a lack of direct evidence linking Scott to the murders. The prosecution's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and speculation, failing to meet the burden of proof required for a death penalty conviction.
The appeals process, though lengthy and complex, offered a glimmer of hope to Scott's family and supporters, a chance, however slim, that he might one day walk free, or at the very least, escape the executioner's needle. Each legal victory, each overturned ruling, fueled their belief that justice would ultimately prevail. The appeals process, however, was a double-edged sword, keeping the case alive in the public consciousness, reopening old wounds and subjecting both the Peterson and Rocha families to renewed scrutiny and pain. The legal battles, though necessary, prolonged their agony, delaying any sense of closure or healing. In a stunning turn of events, a California Supreme Court ruling in 2020 sent shockwaves through the legal system and offered Scott Peterson a glimmer of hope.
The court, while upholding his murder convictions, overturned his death sentence, citing irregularities in the jury selection process.
The ruling, hailed as a victory by Scott's defense team, reignited the debate about his guilt or innocence.
It also meant that I would now face life in prison without the possibility of parole.
The California Supreme Court's decision was not the end of the legal battle.
In December 2021, the San Mateo County District Attorney's Office announced they would not seek a new death penalty trial.
Scott's sentence was permanently changed to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
The Scott Peterson case, a modern-day tragedy, left an indelible mark on the American psyche. It sparked a national conversation about marriage, infidelity, and the dark potential beneath ordinary lives. The case, fueled by salacious details and constant media coverage, became a national obsession. Public opinion remained divided even after the legal battles concluded. Scott Peterson became a symbol of deceit and cold-blooded murder, etched in true crime history. The case had a profound impact on the victims' families, linking them to a tragedy that shattered their lives. The Scott Peterson case, a stark reminder of life's fragility and the consequences of deceit, continues to fascinate and horrify. In the aftermath of the trial and the ensuing legal battles, Laci and Connor Peterson's memory lived on, not as victims of a horrific crime, but as symbols of life, love, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her unborn child. Their story, though forever intertwined with tragedy, became a testament to the enduring power of hope and the importance of cherishing every precious moment. Laci, remembered for her infectious laugh, her kind heart, and her unwavering love for her family, became an emblem of innocence lost. Her life tragically cut short before she had the chance to experience the joys of motherhood. Connor, forever denied the opportunity to take his first breath, to feel his mother's touch, became a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the preciousness of every unborn child. Their memory lived on through the Laci and Connor's law, passed by Congress in 2004, which recognizes unborn children as victims of violent crime. The law, a testament to the tireless advocacy of Laci's family and supporters, aimed to ensure that such a tragedy would never again be minimized or forgotten. Each year, on Laci and Connor's birthdays and on the anniversary of their disappearance, vigils are held, candles are lit, and prayers are offered, not only to mourn their loss, but to celebrate their lives and the indelible mark they left on the hearts of those who knew and loved them. Despite the guilty verdict, the years of legal battles and the countless hours of media analysis, the Scott Peterson case remains shrouded in unanswered questions, a haunting reminder that some mysteries may never be fully solved. While the legal system delivered its verdict, questions about Scott's motive, his state of mind, and the precise details of Laci and Connor's final moments continue to linger. Why did Scott, a seemingly successful businessman with a loving wife, choose to betray his vows and engage in a clandestine affair? What drove him to commit such a horrific act, to take the lives of his pregnant wife and unborn child? Was it a calculated act of premeditation, or a desperate act of a man spiraling out of control? The lack of a confession, the absence of a definitive motive, and the lingering doubts surrounding certain aspects of the case continue to fuel speculation and debate. True crime enthusiasts, armchair detectives, and legal scholars continue to dissect the evidence, searching for clues, seeking answers that may forever remain elusive. The Scott Peterson case, a chilling reminder that truth can be stranger than fiction, continues to captivate and confound, a testament to the enduring power of mystery and the limitations of even the most thorough investigations. It is a case that will likely be debated and analyzed for years to come, a grim reminder that some questions, no matter how diligently pursued, may never have satisfactory answers.
The Scott Peterson case, a tragedy etched into the annals of American true crime, continues to resonate, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life
and the devastating consequences of deceit and betrayal. The image of Laci Peterson, a young, pregnant woman brimming with life, forever frozen in time, serves as a poignant symbol of innocence lost.
Shattering the facade of a perfect marriage and revealing a chilling narrative of infidelity, lies, and cold-blooded murder.
It ignited a national conversation about love, betrayal, and the motivations behind unthinkable acts.
While the legal system delivered its verdict, meting out a life sentence to Scott Peterson, questions linger, doubts persist, and a sense of unease prevails.
The Scott Peterson case serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that truth can be elusive, justice imperfect, and the human heart capable of both immense love and unimaginable darkness.